So today actually, because we hadn't done a session in weeks/months, wanted to remind myself what the podcast is about in God's gay image. And I thought to myself, okay, I need to make a statement that it should reveal this space and our guests and our conversation should be revelatory. It should reveal our guests to whoever's listening as to whether he or she has found a spiritual life. Because somebody might say, it's not for me and go off on a different tangent. So that's where we're at, is to say, okay, let's find out who you are.
So welcome everybody to In God's Gay Image. So Ferdinand and I today have a very special guest and a great friend of ours. Her name is Jade. So Jade, if you'd like, tell us a little bit about yourself, and we're just really glad to have you.
Yeah. Well, thank you for inviting me. My name's Jade, and I am 34-year-old living in Palm Springs. I'm excited to be on the podcast. My own journey with spirituality, it has been very much moving from darkness into light. And so I guess we can just start at the beginning, really. I will say that after looking at the other videos and your other guests that you've had on the show, I really thought, wow, what could I share that would, help maybe someone else that's interested in spirituality or looking to explore maybe a little bit.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't know what I can share, but I can just give you my experience as it, as it's come to me. I don't have much of a dogmatic spiritual background. I was raised Catholic, but I never really felt connected to my Catholicism. Like even through like the ritual, you talked about rituals and like, the just how it was, how you could connect to that aspect of it. I never really felt that way. I just always felt kind of like it was something to do. I just followed along.
Yeah. I mean, I still am a Catholic, actually. So I do embrace it. In fact, in a recent trip to New York, we went to St. Patrick's Cathedral, and I was reminded that it is, what the things I like about it are the stories in the Bible that I use metaphorically and not literally, and the pageantry that I used to think were just performative, and the hosts and the communions and all that. I just kind of dismissed it, but now I embrace it for the influence that it's given me now, and the lessons that I found in the Bible. So the entire thing is wrapped up in this like fond memory of my childhood that's been hybridized by so many different other philosophies that I've learned through the years. So I think, I wanted to engage this, this question with you, and that oftentimes in the beginning, other voices fill our heads about religion, right? And at some point, we reclaim our version of spirituality. Where did that start for you? Like what spark?
Actually, it's been more recent. So my experience with religion was completely different than my experience with spirituality. And I would say my experience with spirituality, though I might not have realized, began probably when I was in my 20s. So prior to that, I've always felt very alone. I kind of talked down on people who were of faith because I felt as if I don't know why I really decided to do that. In high school, me and my friends would it was like the thing to do is be atheist. Like if you were atheist, like you were more of a scientific person. And not that I really knew much about science anyway, but like, and how could I really comprehend the cosmos and the universe and like all of existence? Really, I didn't have any idea, but I just felt alone. I guess that's the thing. And that feeling kind of pervaded, that was from my childhood to my adolescence and early adulthood, I kind of felt at the end of the day alone. And there were different moments over the course of my life where I had a stark realization that I wasn't alone. And those were like glimpses. And I will say that it wasn't like once the door was opened, it was like, open completely, and I was like embracing a spiritual life or like a spiritual sense and feeling like connected to God.
Right.
And I call my higher power God just because it's easier for me to remember. Like it's just it flows off the tongue a little bit better.
Yeah.
But I don't really think of my God as like one that was handed down to me necessarily.
Right.
Um
Like a spiritual tradition that was handed down to you.
Exactly. I mean,
Yeah,
I think back on like my grandmother who like with her prayer beads and how she, even through her sickness, which now that I look back on it, like it was actually, there's like a reassurance there. Like she had religion and she had spirituality. She had a really strong personal connection to God. Same thing with my aunt. And it seems to be like when they were struggling with their health or when there was some sort of pain or struggle that you could really see that they would lean into their faith.
Yeah.
And so my grandmother had like struggles with her health. I remember, even from when I was really young, she was always really sick with pulmonary. She ended up passing away from pulmonary fibrosis, which is like scarring of the lung tissue. So it was really sad and her health deteriorated. But she was always very like, she was just in such acceptance of her conditions.
Oh.
And she just knew that like once she passed, it was on to the next adventure. And she really believed that she was going to heaven. She really believed that there was more. Yeah. And so she was actually, I think she was kind of looking forward to that end in a sense because it was freedom from all of the, being trapped in that body.
My great-grandmother was like that. My great-grandmother, I remember as a child and her telling me that she was ready to, transition, or she was ready to die. Her husband had died very young. And so she spent the majority of her life, she never remarried, spent the majority of her life by herself.
Yeah.
And she was very, very spiritual, I don't remember her being particularly religious, but really, really spiritual. And so she was also excited to be at the end of her life.
I do think that is one of the, one of the things about religion that we humans rely on. It prepares us or it comforts us in times of distress. We, I don't say imagine, but we have a sense of a continuity after we die in this body of ours. I think that's part of what, why religion exists. And spirituality, when I think about your relatives and your aunts and stuff, and I think that in their final days, they probably took comfort, and the next adventure, the Odyssey, continues.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about, when you were younger, and then so there you have your family and they have their Catholicism, and you had basically like sort of two coming outs. Can you tell me a little bit about, were you like, I had a terrible time with the coming out experience because of the religion that I grew up in. It was really oppressive over me. And so there was a lot of fear and anxiety, mostly from a religious place. Did you experience that? Was that something that was really weighing heavy, or maybe that was in the background?
So my first coming out experience was surrounded by fear. On my, on my part and my mom's. Like I came out to my mom first. But she wasn't really in touch with religion either. Like, so that was like where the disconnect kind of started. I think my mom, and actually that's something that we could probably touch on in a little bit too, is my mom also passed away, and her experience was completely different than my grandmother's. Like her death and like the progression of her health towards the end, she was not in acceptance of that. It was really difficult for her. So anyway, so me coming out, it didn't come from a place of like religious, like, I guess, fear or bias or anything, but she definitely had a fear of how my life was going to turn out. And there was a part of me too for a long time that held on to this belief that she actually, more of the fear was what would other people think of her because of how because of my gayness at the time, or like my queerness, or me coming out at that time.
Now, did she have an idea or an understanding that you also were trans? Was that something that she?
So, I mean, I think one of my aunts says that I used to play with like dolls and, different things. I do remember like definitely that when I was in one of my preschool, I think I was like 3, but I was in preschool, and it was like a learning preschool, and it was like we were all into imagination. And so like we would dress up as like witches, and I dressed up in like a dress, and I was marrying a boy in the class. I don't remember the boy, but clearly that was like my goal back then. Even then it was like my goal.
Right.
But
That's funny.
yeah. So after my parents found out about that, it could have been just, coincidence, but I was pulled out of that school.
Really? Wow.
And so, yeah. And I mean, my aunt said like my dad like really discouraged at me doing anything outside of my gender norm, like playing with a doll versus playing with a truck or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily remember all that. I do remember feeling just different. And I don't know what my mom really felt. I came out as gay because at the time I didn't really have much exposure to like a trans experience. I didn't really see, now there's so much visibility. So many stories are heard. You hear all sorts of experiences. And that was actually part of the reason it was so difficult for me to come out as trans, because and also after coming out, I had this like imposter syndrome for a while, because I felt like, well, I didn't know 100%. Like you hear this narrative of, I don't know, there's people, really popular trans icons or activists that say like, I knew right when I was like 3 years old or 2 years old, I knew I was a woman born in a man's body. And I was like, that wasn't my experience. And so I felt like, well, if it's not my experience, then I can't fit into that box.
Yeah. I think the last time we spoke, what I was shocked about was when you made a statement that you didn't necessarily experience gender dysmorphia.
No, yeah.
And I just thought that was compulsory. I mean,
Well, okay, so now it's interesting actually, because I didn't at the time feel like I had gender dysphoria, but like now I do. And and it has to do with specific attributes, certain parts of my body that that it just it doesn't feel right. At the time, I didn't really qualify that like not feeling right as gender dysphoria, but I mean, now that I'm thinking about it, that's probably what it was. I knew I was attracted to boys, but I didn't necessarily think that I didn't necessarily know that I was like, I felt more in touch with my feminine. And even still, like, I mean, I kind of just, and I have a hard time with like feeling like non-binary, because that's not exactly it. But I definitely like ride that line a lot. I do like certain masculine characteristics of mine, like character attributes, not like my body parts or anything. But I do feel more feminine. And I feel like more female than male.
Yeah.
So it's all like, and that's the thing. It's been such a journey for me, because it's like, I would have had a hard time saying that out loud before, because I would have felt like that would have undercut
goes against the narrative.
Exactly. It would have undercut. Yes, exactly. So, and now I'm a little bit more, I feel a little more empowered to use my voice and to have my own experience and not necessarily fall into another box. So, yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I think that's really important.
Yeah.
Well, Ferdinand was saying that we did go to the Catholic Church when which one was it? It was
St. Patrick's?
St. Patrick's. Yes, when we
Mhm.
were in New York City.
Mhm.
And I didn't grow up in the Catholic faith at all. So growing up in the Southern Baptist tradition, our churches were very stark. There was just a cross on the front, never Jesus hanging on it, and very little ornamentation or anything around. So going in, it's the same. It was very much the same feeling that I had going into the Hindu temples and
Oh,
things, because it's
yes.
so ornate.
Yes, I think in many ways that is to achieve some sort of the optics of it all, the stunning visual sort of ornamentation, the height of the ceilings in Gothic churches in France and all over Europe. It's deliberate that these Gothic, architectural details inside is to actually really, keep your eyes towards the heavens.
Have you gone to any Catholic churches
I mean, all
recently, or do you spend
the
any time?
last time I was in a Catholic church was my grandmother's funeral.
Mm.
Yeah. I can't remember any other time really, other than when I was in my childhood. And I think all Catholic churches, obviously the ones in Temecula where I grew up, not necessarily the same as St. Patrick's,
Mhm.
cathedral,
Sure.
or any of the cathedrals like
Yeah.
the Gothic cathedrals in Europe. But yeah, I mean, I definitely, there are different optics, I'm sure,
Right, yeah.
from a church that the later churches that I would go to, my grandmother on my other side was just Christian, I
Mhm.
guess, like, I don't know if non-denominational Christian, I'm not
Mhm.
sure exactly, but so those churches are a little bit, more plain, I guess.
And you and I are part of a meditation group together.
We are, yes.
So we've been practicing meditation together, which is an interesting, like a movement. Like I've talked at our last episode, actually, I was talking about how much I love the New Age spirituality, because we can take bits and pieces. And one of the things that I found that's been really fantastic is meditation. Obviously, I don't do it as much as I should, or as much as I like, but it really has given a new dimension to my sense of spirituality. And I've found you getting very excited about it and have talked about
I
it.
am. Yeah, actually. So, I would say that meditation brought me more awareness and a little bit more comfort in leaning to prayer. So, like, through meditation,
Oh.
I've found more prayer.
Right.
And because speaking of ritual, I always felt like prayer had to be very ritualistic.
Mhm,
I
mhm.
always felt like, okay, where's my rosary beads?
Rosary beads.
Or something, like, just because I
Hail Mary,
envision,
Mother of God.
I
Yes.
envision my grandmother
Yes.
or like
Mhm.
my aunt. But prayer for me now is more of a conversation, kind of like the conversation that we're having here. It's just like me directly interfacing with God, and
Yes.
God is like, and in my experience, my higher power sees all and is all,
Mhm.
all of this experience. So I can have a very like easy dialogue
Mhm.
with like whatever's going on, and
Mhm.
I will say that I do not feel alone now. Yes, I'm still on the hunt for Mr. Right.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
But when I go to bed at night, I don't feel like I'm disconnected.
Right.
So that's really, really comforting. I think that's like one of the biggest things that I feel with spirituality, that spirituality has brought me, is a sense of connection when I'm not in a room full of other people or even others. Like, I'm just by myself. I'm not alone.
Mm. Mhm.
Yeah.
Mm.
So
We're definitely in sync, because some of the words that I started to jot down or type on my phone had to do with a conversation with God. And so I think that we're kind of getting somewhere here. I have to describe this in this way. In that twilight hour where our eyelids go heavy just before we go to sleep, that's when Wonderland appears to me in so many ways. So many thoughts, but also this conversation I have with my higher power. Oftentimes, like, when I am in a particularly difficult moment in my life, I always ask for strength. So I would think, no matter how progressive we are in terms of the queer journey, in particular trans journey, the moment you leave your dwelling, your apartment in this case, the world is automatically judging us, judging everyone, right? And particularly people that, people that they think they're not used to seeing and interacting with.
Yeah.
You're already receiving these. And I would imagine that there are many times that you ask for strength. What is that like?
A lot of the times, my prayers are not necessarily asking for strength to get through like difficult moments. It's more like the courage to overcome fear. I guess it's the same, in a way, but my prayers a lot of the times my prayers used to be more of like I like to be a victim, I will say. I'm not just being
Right.
serious and
Yeah.
honest here, like completely candid. I like to be a victim.
Mm-hmm.
And so my prayers would be like, God, please allow me to do this. Like as if God were holding me back from, making progress in this area of my life, whatever it was. And now what I ask for is, God, please help me to do this, because it gives me a little bit of I have to walk by God, side by side with my higher power. I can't just sit and expect, even if, I just can't expect God to do things for me, but I need to take action first. And sometimes taking action is scary and I'm afraid of doing things. You talked about like society judging us or like people judging us. So I always had this, I wouldn't say I had a chip on my shoulder, but I can't hide my transness necessarily. Like I could do, that's me. I live my life like as I am. Whereas I feel like prior, I could hide my gayness, if I hadn't transitioned, I could I could hide that, or I could tone everything down so that it was like more in alignment with wherever I was. And so I wouldn't have to push boundaries or make people feel uncomfortable or whatever. But I can't do that now, or I don't do that now. And so I will say that was one of the hardest things for me. Like I had a hard time trusting God and trusting that there was a higher power and a higher purpose, because why was I set up this way? Like why are these my cards? Why are these the chips, or how the chips fell?
Right.
When I see other people like living these blissful lives without this kind of struggle, and I'm just starting to see why. And you talked about adding dimension to life. Like I feel like my life is really, really rich today because of my struggles. I'm able to listen to people and to understand a little bit more of their journey because of where I've been. Right. So this isn't my only struggle in life. Like I have several. And so I will say that each of those moments of pain has brought me greater depth. So,
what brings you joy these days?
Connecting with people like such as yourselves, and I like to help others. I mean, so currently I'm a design assistant at an interior design firm. Yes. That is coming to a close in a week. I'm actually going to be starting at the LGBT Center in Palm Springs. Right. Very, very excited for that. It's more in alignment with what I want to do. And so talking about, there was the Trans Day of Remembrance event, and I might have told you this actually already, but like the Trans Day of Remembrance event, it was a very sad, solemn event. It is, yeah. But it was also very empowering for me. And I don't know necessarily if that was like the purpose of the event was to be empowered, but I felt so much more empowered. I left the event, someone spoke at the end and said like, oh, gay people need to be more like, we need to stand in solidarity with trans people and this and that. And like she seemed to me, it seemed like she was creating this divide almost between the LGBT. And I was like, that's not how I felt. Like my experience has been such that all of my gay friends have been so supportive of me and my experience. And like, I've felt nothing but love from the greater community. Mm-hmm. And someone actually had to put me in check. Well, that's your experience, not the general experience of trans people. And so your privilege may give you a voice. And I never wanted to use like use my voice for anything really, other than I just wanted to kind of live life. I wanted to be authentically me so that I could just feel whole and complete and not like I was wearing a mask all the time. And I really just wanted to find love. Like, honestly, that was always my goal, is just to find somebody that I want, to be with. But I do feel like I'm being pushed towards something. There's something there's something that's guiding me towards getting more involved with community, using my voice for others who may not have that opportunity, others in different states, or who may not have a platform or may not be able to talk to as many people, or who may not have the same privileges that I do. Mm-hmm. So
that seems in line with something that I've experienced listening to Ram Dass. He would always talk about the best way to be of service to other people is to get yourself right, to work on yourself.
Yeah.
And then the more comfortable that we become with ourselves, then we naturally are able to transmit something to others, and we're able to help other people through that. So it sounds very much like that's what you're talking about. This work that you've done, your transition, getting more and more comfortable with exactly who you are. And then it's like our cup is full, and then it starts to overflow, and you send it out, right? It's like it opens up these new opportunities.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I'll share candidly again that I think before I was willing to be authentic, I like to mask myself, and I kind of like to numb out. So I struggled with addiction for all of my 20s, addiction and alcoholism and various addictions. And through getting sober, that's really how I started connecting to the light. That's how I really started to look inward, and I'm able to do the work, I guess, now, instead of just putting it off until tomorrow.
Right. And there's a huge spiritual focus.
Yes.
And any sort of recovery community.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
It's a spiritual illness, and we need a spiritual solution to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's fantastic.
We should give up the life that we have planned for us to live the life that is waiting for us. If anybody personifies that I know in our circle, it's you, because you are living in your truth, and this was waiting for you all this time, and now you're living in it. So you get to convey a sense of this energy in your new role coming up in January. What do you think that's going to look like for you?
Well, I would like it to look like, so in Palm Springs, I will say, this is my experience aside, the trans community is kind of like a little bit separate. And so I would like to see more of a focus on getting like the Trans Health and Wellness Center and other trans community organizations to like partner with the LGBT Center, and more trans people utilizing the services there at the LGBT Center. So that's what I would like to see. Honestly, though, when I create expectations and like hopes and dreams for like the future, I'm just like, okay, well, so honestly, I think this next year, I want to focus on just being okay with surprises and like what's going to happen.
I think that's when the magic happens. You kind of lean into your truth and expression.
Yeah.
And then from that emanates a lot of magic.
Yeah, I think so too.
So, yeah. Looking forward to 2025.
Me too. Definitely.
It's fantastic to talk to you.
Thank
We
you.
really appreciate you coming in with us today. You know, I adore you, and I'm glad that we get to spend as much time as we do throughout our week.
Thank
So
you.
we really appreciate you being
I
here.
love it. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that for me, I've just started to get to know you, initially through Steed, but I think that whenever we see each other, for example, when we were challenged with our, ingredients for the baking yesterday, it was funny. We were both like,
It was really funny because I saw Steed in the morning and then I ran into you at Trader
Right.
Joe's and I was
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh. And then I did end up buying other cookies just in case my cookies didn't
Right.
turn out well.
But
Yeah.
they did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Holiday parties, everyone.
Holiday parties,
So,
yeah.
we had a holiday party that we all had to go to. And
Yes.
anyway, all right. Well, thank you so much for being here. We
Thank
really
you.
appreciate it, and we will talk again. Very
Yes,
soon.
we really
Yes.
appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank
All
you.
right, thanks.